Let's see if they survive without us, laughed the children. But the old man was hiding $1 million inheritance. The dining room smelled of mahogany and regret. Sunlight filtered through dusty Venetian blinds, carving the air into golden bars, a prison of light. At the head of the table sat Samuel Harding, 83 years old, his hands trembling not from age, but from the weight of what he was about to lose. His children surrounded him like vultures, circling a dying sun. Marcus with his Rolex catching the light, Diana scrolling through her phone with manicured indifference, and Thomas, youngest, cruelest, leaning back in his chair as if the whole world bored him. "Dad, we've been over this," Marcus said, cutting his steak with surgical precision. "The house is too much for you. We found a great facility, 24-hour care, activities, other people your age." Samuel's coffee had gone cold. He stared into it as if it were a well that might swallow him whole. "I don't need a facility. I need..." "What you need," Diana interrupted without looking up from her screen, "is to be realistic. You can barely walk to the mailbox anymore. We have our own lives, Dad, our own families." The word families fell like a hammer on glass. Thomas laughed then, a sound like wind through a cemetery. "Let's see if they survive without us," he said to his siblings, loud enough for Samuel to hear. They all laughed. The sound echoed off the walls Samuel had painted himself 40 years ago, when his wife was still alive and laughter meant something different. Samuel said nothing. His silence was an ocean, but in his pocket, his fingers closed around a small brass key, warm as a secret, heavy as the truth. That night, Samuel walked through his garden. The moon hung low and swollen, pregnant with silver light. Roses his wife had planted decades ago still bloomed, stubborn as love, defiant as memory. He moved slowly, each step a negotiation between bone and earth. The grass whispered beneath his slippers. Somewhere in the darkness, a cricket sang its lonely song. He stopped before the old oak tree. Its trunk was thick as history, gnarled with the scars of 100 storms. Samuel placed his palm against the bark, rough, real, alive. He remembered when his children were small enough to fit in his arms, when they would race to this tree every summer evening, when Thomas's laughter was pure and Diana's eyes saw wonder in fireflies. "Where did you go?" he whispered to the tree, or to his memories, or to God. The wind offered no answer. It only rustled the leaves, a sound like shuffled papers in an empty courtroom. Samuel knelt, slowly, painfully, and began to dig at the tree's base with his bare hands. Soil collected under his fingernails, dark as midnight, cool as forgiveness. He dug until his fingers found metal. A box. Waterproof, weathered, but intact. Inside, 3 sealed envelopes. 3 sets of keys. 3 chances at redemption he'd been too proud to offer until now, and a single photograph, his wife on their wedding day, holding wildflowers, her smile a lighthouse in the storm of time. "I kept my promise, Eleanor," he said to her face, to the night, to the life they'd built that somehow crumbled into this. "I waited, like you asked." The cricket stopped singing. The moon watched. The earth held its breath. 3 days later, the children returned, not because they wanted to, but because Samuel had called them. And even vultures return when they sense the end. They found him in the living room, surrounded by boxes they assumed were for the move. The television was off. The house felt cathedral quiet, reverent in a way that made Diana uncomfortable, and Thomas irritated. "Dad, the movers come Thursday." Marcus began, checking his watch. "We really need to—" "Sit," Samuel said. His voice carried a weight it hadn't held in years. "Please." They sat. Samuel placed 3 envelopes on the coffee table, each one addressed in his wife's handwriting, preserved across decades. The sight of their mother's script made Diana's phone slip from her hand, made Marcus's breath catch, made Thomas's smirk finally, mercifully die. "Your mother," Samuel began, and his voice cracked like ice in spring, "left these for you 15 years ago, when she knew she was dying." The silence was a living thing, coiled and waiting. "She made me promise not to give them to you until you needed them most. I thought maybe you'd need them when you lost your jobs or got divorced or faced something that broke you open." He looked at each of them, his eyes ancient seas. "But I realized you need them now, before you lose something you can't get back." Marcus reached for his envelope with shaking hands. Diana's tears came before she even touched hers. Thomas stared at his name in his mother's handwriting and remembered suddenly, violently, that he'd once been a boy who knew how to cry. "Inside," Samuel continued, "you'll find keys to safe deposit boxes. And inside those boxes, you'll find what your mother and I spent our lives building. Not for us, for you, for your children, for every generation that comes after." "How much?" Thomas asked, and immediately hated himself for asking. Samuel smiled, sad, knowing, infinite. "Enough that you never have to choose money over love again. Enough that you can slow down. Come home. Remember what a family sounds like when it laughs without cruelty." Diana opened her envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was a letter, and the first line destroyed her. "My darling girl, by the time you read this, you'll have forgotten how to be soft. I don't blame you. The world is hard on women who feel too much, but softness is not weakness. It is the only real strength there is." Marcus unfolded his letter and found his mother's voice reaching across death itself. "My brilliant son, you were always trying to prove something, but you don't need to. You never did. Your father and I were already proud. Come home." Thomas couldn't open his. His hands wouldn't work. Samuel reached across and did it for him. The way he'd once tied his son's shoes, steadied his first bicycle, held him after nightmares. The letter began, "My wild boy, my brave boy, my boy who hides his heart behind laughter, I see you." Thomas broke then, shattered like a dam that had held back decades of unlived grief. He sobbed the way children sob, total, unconditional, free. Marcus joined him, their tears twin rivers flowing back to the same source. Diana curled into herself, reading her mother's words over and over. Each sentence a stitch repairing something torn. Samuel watched his children cry and felt, for the first time in 15 years, like he could breathe again. 6 months later, the oak tree bloomed with new leaves, impossible for its age, but happening anyway, the way miracles do. Samuel sat beneath it in a wicker chair Eleanor had loved, watching his grandchildren play. Thomas's daughter was teaching Marcus's son how to catch fireflies in mason jars. Diana was on a blanket nearby, her phone face down, reading a book that wasn't about business or optimization or getting ahead. The children had sold their big houses, moved closer. Not next door, they weren't children anymore, but close enough that Sunday dinners were possible again. close enough that loneliness was no longer Samuel's only companion. Marcus appeared with lemonade, homemade, the way his mother used to make it. "Dad." "Yes, son." "Thank you." 2 words, but they carried the weight of everything unsaid. For waiting, for not giving up on us. Samuel accepted the glass, cold and sweet and perfect. "Your mother never gave up on you. I was just following orders." They laughed. Not the cruel laughter of that terrible dinner, but something clean and new, like rain on dusty earth. Thomas emerged from the house carrying a box. Inside it, old photographs, Samuel and Eleanor on their honeymoon. The children as babies, birthdays and Christmases and ordinary Tuesdays made sacred by love and attention. "I found these in the attic," Thomas said quietly. "I thought maybe we could, I don't know, remember together." Diana joined them, barefoot in the grass, her corporate armor shed like a snake's skin. She took a photo of her mother holding her as an infant, both of them laughing at something outside the frame. Something lost to time, but alive in the frozen joy of their faces. "She loved us so much," Diana whispered. "How did we forget?" "We didn't forget," Samuel said, watching the sunlight dance through the oak's new leaves. "We just got lost. But love is patient. Love waits." A breeze moved through the garden, carrying the scent of roses and fresh-cut grass and something else. Something that smelled like second chances and answered prayers. The fireflies began to wake as evening fell, tiny stars rising from the earth. The children caught them gently, held them in wonder, then released them back to the sky. Samuel watched and thought of Eleanor, how she'd always said fireflies were proof that even in darkness, small lights matter. In his pocket, the brass key was gone now. The boxes opened, the inheritance claimed. But the real treasure sat around him, his children learning to be children again, learning to be present, learning that some fortunes can't be spent, only shared. The oak tree whispered in the wind, and if you listened closely, it sounded like Eleanor laughing. The same laugh that had filled this house decades ago. The same laugh that had planted roses and raised children and believed, even when dying, that love was stronger than forgetting. Samuel closed his eyes and felt the sun on his face, warm as a blessing, gentle as the hand he still sometimes felt on his shoulder in the quiet hours of the morning. "I kept my promise," he whispered to his wife, to the wind, to the holy, ordinary miracle of this moment. They came home, and somewhere, in the space between heartbeats and prayers, he heard her answer, "I know, my love. I always knew they would." The garden held them all, the living and the dead, and the love that makes no distinction between the two. As the sun set over the house, Samuel would never have to leave, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose and impossible. Defiant, redemptive hope. If you're reading this now, I want to thank you for witnessing Samuel's story, for sitting with his loneliness and his children's cruelty and the long, patient wait for love to remember itself. Maybe this story found you because you're estranged from someone you once held close. Maybe you're the child who laughed or the parent who waited. Maybe you're simply tired. Tired of moving fast, of measuring worth in dollars, of forgetting that softness is not surrender. Whatever brought you here, I hope you felt something true, something that reminded you that it's never too late to come home. Not to a place, but to the people who made you, who shaped you, who are still waiting with porch lights on and lemonade cold and forgiveness that asks for nothing but your presence. The inheritance we leave behind is not in bank accounts or safe deposit boxes. It's in the way we love when loving is difficult, in the way we wait when waiting feels impossible, in the oak trees we plant knowing we may never sit in their shade. Before you go, I want to ask you something, not as a writer to a reader, but as one human heart to another. Which moment in this story reached your heart the most? Was it Samuel digging in the garden, the children breaking open with tears, or the fireflies rising at the end? Whatever it was, hold it close. Let it remind you that you are never too lost to be found, never too far to come home, never too late to say the things that matter. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling. May you find your way back to your oak tree, wherever it grows. With love and endless hope.